Hello everyone, this is Stephen Balch, your instructor for Introduction to Microeconomics at Ozarka College. Today what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of feedback on the chapters 5 and 6 activities that I finished grading late last week. And then I'm going to tell you what we've got coming up due for our next set of activities for chapters 7 and 8 later this week. So first thing is, like I said, I did finish grading the chapters 5 and 6 activities last week. Hopefully you've gone in and looked at your grades for those. You've had plenty of time to do that. If you haven't done that, do that as soon as you can, like today if possible, and let me know if you have any questions at all. Most of you did well on the chapters 5 and 6 assignment. I did have to count some points off here and there for not answering the questions thoroughly enough, or on some of the problems where you had to do some calculations or look at a graph and come up with numbers and so forth based on certain questions that you had. Some of you had some problems with those. On those particular problems that you worked out from the textbook, if you missed those, I tried to give you the correct answers. If I didn't do that on yours, just let me know, and I'll be glad to give you the correct answers so that you can kind of go back and see on the problems why you missed the ones that you did and what the correct answers were. Like I said, I tried to include that on everyone's grading comments, but if you notice something that's missing, something that you still don't understand from the grading of the assignment, just let me know. I'll be glad to help you, okay? But overall, most of you did well on the assignment, so keep up the good work on that. The discussion that we had for chapters 5 and 6 dealt with the elasticity of demand for cigarettes. And, of course, we've talked about in chapters 5 and 6, we talked about elasticity of demand, which is basically just how responsive quantity demanded is to price changes. And of course, we understand now that businesses need to understand what the elasticity of demand is for their product so that they can better price the product to maximize profit. And so we talked about the elasticity of demand for cigarettes and why the elasticity is actually so inelastic. For cigarettes, obviously, it's an addictive product people get addicted to, and so even if the price goes up, a lot of people will still buy it because of that addiction quality of it. And we talked about that, and I thought everybody provided some good information on that. Hopefully that discussion allowed you to kind of see a real-world example of how elasticity affects a particular market, a particular product in a particular market like that. Of course, elasticity values are different for each kind of product. And we talked about some of the things in chapters 5 and 6. We talked about the factors that, or the characteristics that determine the elasticity of demand. Just go back and make sure that you really understand that, because that's something that we'll revisit later on, and we'll need to understand elasticity values throughout the semester. So if you still have questions about that, just let me know. But I think most of you understood that, at least from the discussion that we had. I think most of you did well on the discussion, provided some good information. I really enjoyed reading your comments, so keep up the good work on that. The chapters 5 and 6 objective test, most of you did well on that. Just as a reminder, you can take those tests as many times as you want to up until the due date, and your highest grade is automatically recorded. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, that brings us to what we've got coming up due for our next set of activities. So right now we're on the beginning portion of week 5 of the semester, and we've got chapters 7 and 8 activities due by Friday of this week, which is the September 19th. So you've got just a little under a week to be working on the Chapter 7 and 8 activities. Hopefully, a lot of you have already gotten started on this. There are some problems that you'll have to work out for the Chapter 7 and 8 assignment, so it's probably going to be to your benefit to get started on these activities as soon as possible, because they will take some time to complete. For example, on the Chapter 7 and 8 assignment, you're going to have some problems that you're going to work on from the textbook, and on those problems from the textbook, like for example, question 4, where you're answering problem 7.2 on page 141 in the textbook, it's going to have you calculate the marginal utility per dollar for each unit of each good, and I've included a table, just like I've done on some previous assignments. I've included a table down here at the bottom of the assignment page. Right down here, there's a worksheet for problem 7.2 where you're calculating marginal utility, and then there's also a worksheet for problem 8.2, which is where you're calculating total product and marginal product. Okay. Also, as it talks about in the assignment instructions, in addition to those worksheets that I've posted down here at the bottom of the assignment page, that I'd like you to use and insert into your assignment when you submit it, and of course, complete the actual table by doing the calculations that you need to, answering the questions on the assignment. But also, in order to kind of help you complete those tables and complete those calculations, I've included some videos here at the bottom of the page here to kind of help you. So there's one called Calculating Marginal Utility Over Price, or Marginal Utility Per Dollar, and Consumer Equilibrium. So if you're not sure how to calculate marginal utility per dollar, and how to use those numbers to figure out the consumer equilibrium point, then watch the video here that I've posted for you. So in the video, what I do is I give you an example that's very similar to the problem that you're working on the assignment, and it's not exactly the same, but it is similar. And so I kind of take you through the process in the video of making the calculations that are necessary, and then using those calculations to figure out where the equilibrium point is for consumer equilibrium. And then on this other video, what I've done here, this one's called Calculating Total Product and Marginal Product. And so on here, I've also done the same thing. I've basically created an example. It's not like the one that's it's not the exact numbers that are on the one that you're going to be completing, but it is similar numbers, and I give you all the formulas and stuff that you're going to need, and how you're going to go through the process of calculating total product and marginal product, and then finding the point of diminishing marginal returns. Okay, it's really not a difficult process, but like I said, I would really highly recommend watching the videos to kind of guide that process as you're working on the assignment. Okay, so be working on that. Like I said, give yourself plenty of time, because this is not something you're going to be able to do just in a couple of hours. It's going to take some time. So if you haven't already started on the Chapter 7 and 8 assignment, I would highly recommend doing so right away, just to give yourself plenty of time, because you are going to have to read through several resources, watch videos, and work through some problems. Okay. Make sure, this is something that I had to count points off for on previous assignments, make sure when it says to show your calculations on the problems that you're working through, make sure you actually show all your calculations. All right. I want to make sure that you're not just getting the right answer, but that you're getting to the right answer in the right way. using the right techniques and the right formulas, okay? And the only way I know that is for you to show your calculations, all right? So just kind of be aware of that now. Let me also very briefly here tell you what you're going to be covering in Chapter 7 and 8. We've kind of already looked at it as we were looking through the assignment, but let me very briefly kind of go over what specifically you're going to be learning about in Chapter 7 and 8. Starting with Chapter 7, it covers consumer choice and demand. Specifically in Chapter 7, we're going to be looking at utility and analyzing utility to figure out how consumers make economic choices, okay? And that's one of those problems that I just talked about where you're calculating the marginal utility over the price. That is one of the ways that we figure out how consumers maximize their utility in order to, with the limited budget that they have, okay? Utility analysis is what's covered in Chapter 7. And then in Chapter 8, we're going to cover production and cost in the firm. This is kind of a preliminary chapter that's going to kind of introduce you to the basic terminology that we need to know about, like economic profit and accounting profit, variable cost, fixed cost, diminishing marginal returns, marginal cost, and so forth, so that when we start talking about specific types of markets, we can better understand how each producer makes decisions in the market, in the type of market that they operate in, okay? Just kind of keep that in mind. And then another thing in Chapter 8 that we'll look at the very end of the chapter is something that's very important in economics, and this is the short run versus the long run, okay? There are certain things that are true in the short run in economics. Mostly, the biggest thing for microeconomics in the short run is that we have some type of fixed cost in the short run, and we have that fixed cost no matter how much we produce. And that is what guides our decisions in the short run. In the long run, it's a time period in economics that we define as a long enough period of time that we could get rid of our fixed resources and have no fixed cost in the long run. So in the long run, we have no fixed cost. All of our costs are variable in the long run, okay? And of course, the actual time period, whether it's 1 month or 1 year or 5 years, depends on what type of market and what type of product you're producing, what type of market you're operating in, okay? Those are Chapter 7 and 8 topics that you'll be looking at this week. And so as you're working through those assignment questions and you're working through the discussion and so forth, just let me know if you have any questions. And again, those are due by Friday of this week, September 19th. Just let me know if you have questions. Enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend, and I will talk to you again sometime, probably early next week. Thank you.